The pounding on my door shook the walls, and before I could even open it, I heard a voice screech, "Sheriff, arrest him!" 4 men in fake uniforms stood beside Karen, clutching batons and shotguns. What didn't they know? The man inside the house was the real sheriff. When I first moved into the neighborhood, I thought I had found peace. The lawns were trimmed, the sidewalks were quiet, and families waved as they walked their dogs. It was the kind of suburban calm people dream about, the kind where nothing ever seemed out of place, at least not at first. But I quickly noticed something odd. Doors closed fast when footsteps approached. Neighbors whispered in half-sentences, cutting themselves off whenever a shadow lingered. It was like everyone lived under an invisible cloud. And soon I learned that the cloud had a name, Karen. She wasn't just a neighbor. She was the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA. Clipboard in hand, she patrolled the streets as if she owned every brick and blade of grass. My very first weekend, she knocked on my door, scowling at the mailbox I had just installed. "Not regulation," she snapped. "You'll need to replace it." I laughed lightly, thinking she was joking. But the sharpness in her eyes told me she wasn't. She listed off infractions: the way I parked, the height of my grass, even the color of my porch light. Each violation sounded more absurd than the last. I wanted peace, so I nodded, smiled, and told her I'd consider it. But behind her, I noticed something chilling. Neighbors watching from their windows, frozen like statues. They weren't curious. They were afraid. Over the next weeks, I saw the fear everywhere. A child's bike left on the lawn disappeared by morning. A neighbor's fence suddenly carried a bright orange violation sticker. People paid fines in cash, whispering about keeping the peace. Karen didn't just enforce rules. She ruled by fear. And while I stayed calm, I knew sooner or later she'd come back for me. It didn't take long. A letter slid under my door one morning. "Notice of violation. The crime? Leaving my trash bins out for an extra hour? The fee? $200. $200 for bins sitting on the curb of my own property." I crumpled the paper and tossed it aside. But Karen wasn't done. The next week I found a bright red sticker on my garage door. Non-compliance. A threat of escalating fines. I wasn't the only one. My next-door neighbor whispered that she had been charged $500 for a garden gnome not in accordance with community aesthetics. The more I listened, the more sinister it sounded. People paid out of fear, not law. Karen's voice carried weight, not because she was right, but because no one wanted to fight back. Then came the threats. One evening, as I returned from work, Karen was waiting by my driveway. She pointed at my truck, her tone icy. "That vehicle isn't permitted here." "Too large. I'll have it towed." I crossed my arms. "That's not in the bylaws." Her lips curled. "We make the rules here. Either follow them or face consequences." It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Like she had an army standing behind her. And that's when the rumors began trickling in. Karen had enforcers. Men who wore uniforms with HOA police stitched across their chests. They carried batons, sometimes even firearms. Neighbors whispered about them showing up late at night, intimidating anyone who dared question the rules. I didn't believe it, until I saw them. One Saturday morning, 2 men in mismatched green shirts walked the street, slapping notices on doors. Their badges looked plastic. Their belts overloaded with gear they didn't know how to wear. They looked like children playing cops, except they carried real weapons, and everyone acted like it was normal. But I wasn't everyone. And deep down I knew it was only a matter of time before they came knocking on my door. Warning signs came slowly, like a storm rolling in. First, a second violation notice, then a third. My supposed offenses ranged from parking at an angle to having the wrong shade of curtains, each one more ridiculous than the last. Finally, A knock at the door, 3 men in green shirts, their eyes shifting nervously as they handed me an official citation. HOA police, one of them said, trying to sound tough. Failure to comply may result in removal from the property. I studied their uniforms. The badges were cheap metal discs, the patches stitched unevenly. Their boots didn't match. But the worst part wasn't the uniforms. It was the fear they tried to project. They gripped their batons like they weren't sure how to use them, yet desperate to prove they could. Karen stood behind them, arms folded. Smug smile plastered across her face. "Consider this your final warning," she said. "Next time we won't be so polite." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I smiled, thanked them, and closed the door. Because the truth was simple. They weren't real. And soon they were going to learn the hard way that I was. The night it happened, I was sitting at my kitchen table sipping coffee when the pounding began. It was so loud the windows rattled. "Sheriff, arrest him!" Karen's voice pierced the silence like a blade. I opened the door to find her standing proudly, 4 men behind her. They were dressed in those same ridiculous uniforms, only this time their weapons weren't just for show. Shotguns hung from their shoulders, batons gripped tight. Their eyes darted nervously as they tried to puff their chests. "You're trespassing on HOA property," Karen barked. "These officers will take you down if you don't leave immediately." Across the street, blinds twitched. Cell phones glowed as neighbors filmed from behind curtains. Some even dared to step outside, drawn by the noise. The officers stepped forward, but I didn't move. I folded my arms, calm, steady, and let the smallest smile cross my face. Karen tilted her head. "What's so funny?" I took a step closer, my voice low. "Maybe you should explain this to the sheriff's department." Confusion flickered in her eyes, but before she could respond, headlights swept the street. A police cruiser rolled up, lights flashing red and blue. Real deputies stepped out, their badges catching the glow. The fake cops froze. The neighbors gasped. And Karen's face drained of color as the real law finally entered the stage. The deputies walked straight past me, eyes fixed on the men in green. "Ma'am," one said, voice clipped. "Where did you find these officers?" Karen stiffened. "They're HOA police. They enforce community rules." "He," she jabbed a finger at me, "doesn't belong here." The deputy's jaw tightened. "There's no such thing as HOA police." The words hung heavy in the air. One of the fake cops shuffled backward, nearly tripping on the curb. Another gripped his baton so tightly his knuckles turned white. Karen's face twisted, desperate. "Don't you dare question my authority. This man has been violating regulations, and I will not stand for it." That's when I stepped forward, pulling folded papers from my pocket. "Funny," I said, raising them high, "because according to county records, this property isn't part of your HOA at all. And you just tried to trespass on the sheriff's home with fake officers?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. One deputy turned to me, nodding in recognition. Karen staggered back, eyes wide. You're the sheriff?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The weight of the truth was already crushing her. The deputies moved quickly, questioning the fake cops. Their answers stumbled, tripping over lies. One muttered about being contracted. Another claimed Karen had hired them directly. Their stories didn't match, and fear seeped through every word. Karen waved a folder wildly. "I have documents. Proof of authority." The deputy snatched it, flipping through the pages. His brow furrowed deeper with every sheet. Finally, he looked up, voice cold. "These signatures are forged. This seal? From a print shop? These aren't legal documents. They're fake." The neighbors erupted in whispers, phones raised higher now. One shouted, "She's been lying this whole time!" Another gasped, "I paid her $2,000 for a fence violation." The fake cops backed away, their tough act crumbling. One dropped his baton entirely. Another whispered, I'm not going to jail for this. Karen's voice cracked as she tried to regain control. Stop! Don't listen to them! I'm the HOA president. I own this neighborhood. But no one believed her anymore. The deputies stepped forward, cuffs ready, and Karen realized the empire she had built on lies was collapsing in front of everyone. The first fake cop confessed. She paid us. Said it was legal. Said she had power over this place. His words carried across the crowd, caught on a dozen cameras. Karen spun, hair flying, eyes blazing. Shut up! Don't say another word! But it was too late. The deputies had all they needed. One locked cuffs around the man's wrists. Another secured the others. The neighborhood erupted in laughter, jeers, and even cheers. Karen's face flushed red. She pointed at me, her voice trembling. You'll regret this. I run this neighborhood! I stepped closer, locking eyes with her. My voice was calm, sharp. You don't even own this sidewalk. And you sure don't own me, the neighbors gasped, their fear replaced with courage. For the first time, Karen looked small, trapped. And still I knew we weren't at the end yet. As deputies searched the fake cop's vehicle, they found boxes of violation notices, forged letters stamped with fake county seals, and envelopes of cash. This isn't just HOA business, one deputy muttered. It's a scam. Neighbors stepped forward, voices trembling with anger. One woman held up her phone. She threatened me, said if I didn't pay, CPS would take my kids. Another shouted, she towed my truck for cash. The deputies collected everything as evidence. But then one pulled a file from the box, his face grim. Sheriff, these aren't just forged papers. They're signed by a real HOA board member. My stomach tightened. Karen hadn't been working alone. Before I could ask who, a voice cut through the crowd. Richard Bowen, HOA treasurer, strolled forward, calm as ever, glass of iced tea in hand. All this noise for a simple HOA matter? He smirked. Karen screamed from the cruiser window. Richard! Don't leave me here! Tell them we're in this together. The crowd froze. Richard laughed nervously, but the deputy raised the documents high. Funny. Your name is all over these. Gasps. Phone swung toward him. Richard's calm cracked. The glass shattered in his hand. You don't know who you're messing with, he hissed, but the sirens cut him off. More cruisers swarmed in, deputies surrounding him. His men arrived in a black SUV, but they were outnumbered in seconds. Richard fought, but the cuffs closed tight around his wrists. The neighbors erupted. Cheers relief, even tears. For the first time in years, the street belonged to its people, not tyrants. I raised my voice, firm and final. No HOA, no fraud, no bully has the right to take your freedom. Not here, not ever, the crowd roared. Families hugged. Kids laughed. And as Karen and Richard were driven away, I knew this wasn't just about one HOA. It was about standing up to anyone who thought fear could be mistaken for power. Justice had spoken, and it wore a real badge. What would you have done if fake cops showed up at your door? Tell me in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe, because the next story is even crazier than this one.